Good morning, America. Good afternoon, Eretz Yisrael. We're continuing the Shiur on Chayei Moharan. We're in this section called Gedulas Noiros Hasogosoi, the great high level of achievement of Rabbeinu Zal Baruch Nias. In this version, it's paragraph Reish Nun Beis. Rabbeinu Zal in chapter 6 in Likutei Moharan, Rabbeinu Zal explains that when a person wants to come close to Hashem, and especially if a person wants to do tshuva, they need to know that they're going to be operating in two directions. They're going to be going up, and they're going to be going down. They're going to be climbing, and they're going to fall. And Rabbeinu Zal in that turn, Likutei Moharan says that a person has to learn a lot to be able to know how to climb correctly, how to go from level to level, keep going higher and higher, and also how to deal with the falls that a person experiences. When a person feels very distant from Hashem, very low, and Rabbeinu Zal quotes the Zohar HaKodesh. The Zohar HaKodesh uses the term rotzoi. Rotzoi means when a person is running up kaviyachol to Hashem, and shoiv means returning. And this is based on a pasuk in Yecheskel Hanavi where it speaks about the malachim, the angels, and the pasuk says v'hachayos rotzoi v'shoiv, that these angels that are called chayos, they go up and down, up and down. And Rabbeinu Zal elaborates on this in that chapter in Likutei Moharan, that shiur which was given on a Shabbos Shuvah. And Rav Nasan Zal has a lot in Likutei Halachos on that topic, because this is one of the most important things that a person needs to know who wants to be religious, who wants to serve Hashem. We need to know that we're not robots, and our life doesn't operate like this in a straight line, but rather a person always is having ups and downs. Hashem created the world that way. Hashem created the world that there's night and day. There's darkness and light. And this is in many different shapes and forms and on many different levels. So now, Rabbeinu Zal said about himself that for him, the rotzoi doesn't take any real effort at all. That to him comes natural, comes easy to keep going higher and higher, increasing the speed, increasing the intensity of serving Hashem all the time. Whereas he said that for him, the voshoiv, that comes difficult for him. The going to sleep, the eating and drinking, all of those kind of things that are in the category of voshoiv, where it's not climbing, it's not running up to Hashem, but it's the concept of coming back down, that kind of thing. To him, that's an avodah. That takes tremendous effort, because of the fact that he said he had already succeeded in breaking all of his physical, materialistic desires. All of that was finished. And therefore, the rotzoi, the running up to Hashem, that comes natural to him. The neshama, what the neshama wants to do, comes natural to him. The neshama just wants more and more ruchnias. But the vashoiv, that takes effort and concentration. And the fact is that everybody needs the vashoiv. Even the greatest tzaddik must have the vashoiv. Because if not, if a person just keeps going up and not coming back down, the person dies. The person's neshama leaves them. The person will pass away before the right time. So therefore, everyone has to have this rotzoi vashoiv. But again, people are on different levels. There are people who enjoy learning Torah. They enjoy going to shul and davening, and for them it's an effort when they have to stop learning, when they have to stop davening. And there are other people for whom it's the opposite. We need to know that both are necessary, and we need to know that no two people are on the same level regarding this. Every single person is different. I remember hearing once from my Rebbe Rav Rosenfeld Zichron Livracha that I believe the words rotzoi vashoiv is bigematria batoira. That this is all in the Torah, in observance of the Torah and mitzvahs. There is this rotzoi vashoiv. There are certain mitzvahs that involve a person climbing, going up higher and higher, and there are certain mitzvahs that require coming down in a sense. We have the example that we learned about recently in the Torah about Nadav and Avihu. Nadav and Avihu were the older sons of Aaron HaKohen, who were major tzaddikim. When the Torah speaks about them, the Torah refers to them as, Hashem refers to them as Bikroivai, those who are very close to me. And yet the Torah tells us that they attempted to offer Ktoiris in the Mishkan, and they weren't qualified to do it, and they got killed in the process. They died in the process. A heavenly fire came out and took their neshamas. The question is, what was missing? The Torah, Hashem calls them Bikroivai, they're close to me. So what quality were they missing that because of that they weren't qualified to bring the Ktoiris? There are a number of answers given. One of the major answers that's given in the Zohar Kodesh is they weren't married. They weren't married. A person would say, that's a qualification for Ruchnius? It seems usually many people, especially Bachrim who are learning in yeshiva, if they're learning really well in those years when they're 17, 18, you tell them you have to get married. Oh shucks, that means I'm not going to be able to be learning full time. I'm not going to be able to be spending all my time in the Beis Medrash. Yes, it's true. In most cases, that is the case. That getting married is going to involve other responsibilities which are going to take a person out of the Beis Medrash for hours. However, we're told that without that, a person cannot reach the heights and cannot approach the real heights in Kedusha. For example, if a person wants to study Kabbalah, the secrets of Torah, one of the requirements in order for a person to be able to get the right benefits from this study is to be married. And here in the case of Nadav and Avihu, in order to be able to offer the Ktoiros, which is the holiest of all the Karbonos on a certain level, had to be married. What is getting married? Getting married means going down. Going down in what way? Because on Al-Pi Kabbalah, according to Kabbalah, and in a general way, the man represents Chesed, the woman represents Gevura. The man represents the sun, the woman represents the moon. So on a general level, it's assumed that the man is higher, the woman is lower. Even though the Zohar Kodesh tells us there's a concept of Eishes Chayil Ateres Bala, that the woman can be a moving target. She can be below the husband, and she can be the crown on his head. She can even go above. But the default, the norm is that she's on a lower level, and it's extremely important for him to be willing to go down, to meet her, and to be able to elevate her, to bring her up. And because Nadav and Avihu wanted to be close to Hashem, they wanted pure Kedusha, and they didn't realize that it's not possible to get the real high Kedusha without that connection, without connecting the connection that comes through marriage, the connection that comes through the avodah of Voshoiv, this Voshoiv. Any questions, please?
Yeah, what's going down about a husband and wife marrying?
Question, what's going down about a husband and wife being married? We mentioned a lot of responsibilities. To get an apartment, a bachur is living by his parents. If he wants, everything is taken care of for him. He has a roof over his head, his bed is made, his clothing is washed. He doesn't have to worry about bringing parnasa, his expenses are being paid. Once a person gets married, usually there's all kinds of responsibilities. Well, even just speaking with a wife, spending a certain amount of time during a day talking to a wife. And usually a wife is not a chavrusa in the sense that they're going to be talking only Torah. They have to talk about other things. That's all a concept of going down in order to be able to go up, in order to really be able to go up. The next paragraph, Reish Nun Gimel, Rabbeinu Zal said, any time that any of my students or followers want to do something for me, or they want to do something that I have instructed them to do, there are all kinds of obstacles that try to get in the way to block the person from being able to accomplish it. Because there are many, many forces of the sitra achra, of the opposition, that try to mess up and not allow a person to accomplish something that's related to me, Rabbeinu Zal said. Why? Because when a person does accomplish something that Rabbeinu Zal said we should do, or something for Rabbeinu Zal, then there are many, many worlds that benefit from it. It affects many different spiritual worlds. And these worlds are waiting for a person to accomplish something that Rabbeinu Zal wanted us to accomplish. We'll give examples in a minute. And therefore, the opposition, the sitra achra, stands and tries to do everything in its power to block a person, that the person should not be able to accomplish something that Rabbeinu Zal wanted us to. And Rabbeinu Zal said this even relates to small things, no matter what it is. If it's something that's for me, there's going to be all kinds of obstacles. An example that Rabbeinu Zal himself gave, not here, is the Tikkun HaKloli. Tikkun HaKloli is something that's relatively easy. It takes 10 minutes, 12 minutes, and it's reciting Tehillim. Most Jews have nothing against saying Tehillim. Most Jews say Tehillim. But the fact that Rabbeinu Zal revealed this special formula, these 10 chapters in this order, Rabbeinu Zal said at the time that even though this is relatively an easy thing, you're going to see that there are many, many people that they're going to find reasons not to do it, not to say it. Because Rabbeinu Zal said so, because Rabbeinu Zal said to do this, right away the sitra achra knows about this, and he'll try to do find all kinds of ways to avoid accomplishing it. Another example is hispedus, speaking to Hashem in your own words, which Rabbeinu Zal said you could do it any time, any location, and no matter how you're feeling. When you're feeling good and happy, speak to Hashem from a place of happiness. When you're feeling down, tell Hashem your problems. So it's not like you can only focus on a certain kind of conversation. It's always available, anything. You would think it's like the easiest thing in the world. But because Rabbeinu Zal is the one who told us to do this, right away we need to know to expect manias, all kinds of opposition and obstacles to prevent a person from doing it. And if we don't know about it, when a person isn't ready for something, if somebody's going to punch you in the stomach and you're not ready, that punch is going to have a devastating effect. But if you're told, listen, I'm gonna punch you, prepare yourself, and the person tightens their stomach, usually it won't hurt that much. Or a doctor's about to put a needle to insert a intravenous needle into the arm, and the nurse says it's gonna hurt for a second. If the person didn't expect it and it happens, the person, ouch! The person expected it and they prepared, nothing, no big deal. The fact that Rabbeinu Zal is telling us this is for us to be aware of this, so that when a person sees these obstacles, to know that it's not a sign that I'm not worthy. There are people that say maybe it means that I'm not worthy of doing it. It's because this is important, and because the tzaddik said to do it, the Satan here knows that and will try to block it. It's interesting that this explains why when Rabbeinu Zal first revealed to Rab Nasan Zal the topic of hispedus, this was when Rab Nasan Zal, shortly after Rab Nasan Zal met Rabbeinu Zal, and Rab Nasan Zal started pouring out his heart and telling Rabbeinu Zal all the difficulties that were going on in his life at the time. So it says that Rabbeinu Zal gave him specific advice regarding each one of the issues he brought up. And then afterwards, Rabbeinu Zal said, and it's also, he put his hand around Rab Nasan Zal's shoulder, and he said, and it's also very good if a person pours out his heart to Hashem as you would to a best friend. And the question is, what kind of also? This is the most important thing in Avodas Hashem. Why did Rabbeinu Zal present it like that, as if it's an afterthought? And the answer is, this I heard from my Rebbe, Reb Michal Dorfman, Zechron Livrocha, that Rabbeinu Zal knew that whenever he's talking, the Satan is listening also. And if he were to say, this is the most important thing in your life, the Satan would hear that and say, oh, now I know exactly what to do. And therefore, Rabbeinu Zal presented it in such a way that if you're smart, if you're Reb Nasan Zal heard this, and he got the message, he got the hint, and he understood that just because it's being presented that way doesn't mean this is an afterthought. This is everything. And this concept of paying close attention, very close attention, when a tzaddik speaks sometimes, because there are times that the tzaddik knows he's not allowed to reveal certain things openly, because if he would, there'd be such difficult obstacles that the person couldn't overcome it. So he presents it, either he says it in a completely hint form, or he says it in such a way, matter-of-factly. And if the person is machshiv, if the person considers important anything he hears from a tzaddik, the person will take it seriously and get the full benefit. Any questions? The next paragraph, Reish Nun Dalid, Rav Nasan Zal says, I heard it told over in the name of Rabbeinu Zal that he said that there's going to come a time when people are going to say, wow, you knew Rabbi Nachman? You were in his house? Or you knew one of his followers? And it's going to be something amazing to people that a person was zoche to know Rabbeinu Zal. And not just that, but even someone who knew any of his students will be considered a tremendous chiddush. Meaning that there'll come a time when he'll be recognized, people will recognize that this was really an incredible person, a tremendous chiddush, and anyone who was zoche to get to know him, very special. It's interesting, on a far, far lower level, not to compare, and yes, to compare in a certain way. I know my Rebbes, Rav Rosenfeld, Rav Michal Zichron Levrocha, Rav Yechaim, these people from the previous generation, who during their lifetime, there were some people that had more respect, less respect, but they didn't have that much recognition. And years later, I meet people and people tell me, you knew this person? Or I meet people who know that I was privileged to spend time with Reb Michal, to drive him, and they look at me, you were the one who drove him, you were the one who saw him every day, that kind of thing. There's a famous quote in Klal Yisrael, there are 3 parshias in the Torah that follow one after another. Acharei Mois, then comes Kedoshim, then comes Emor in Chumash Vayikra. And there's a joke, and it's not a joke, that says, Acharei Mois, after a tzaddik or a Talmud Chacham passes away, Kedoshim Emor. They say, wow, he was holy, he was a real holy person. But during his lifetime, usually they don't receive that recognition. And in fact, Rabbeinu Zal spoke about this, and Rav Nasan Zal, that the main test of emunas tzadikim and emunas chachamim is during the lifetime. Afterwards, we're going to see Rabbeinu Zal, I believe we're going to have it shortly, Rabbeinu Zal says about the Arizal, that the Arizal during his life, Rav Nasan Zal says in Likutei Halachos, that the Arizal during his lifetime, there was major opposition. And a person would say, what do you mean? He wasn't Breslov? He wasn't the Chassid? Who would oppose him? And the answer is anyone who made such a difference in Klal Yisrael had opposition. Moshe Rabbeinu, we just read Parshas Koirach, Parshas Shlach, major opposition. Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai had to run for his life, had to hide out for 13 years because someone wasn't careful enough and said word that got back to the Roman government that put out a contract on Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai that wanted to see him dead. Now Rav Nasan Zal adds also, I also heard it said over in the name of Rabbeinu Zal, that he said that he will learn Torah, he's going to learn with the Shiva Royim, with Avram, Yitzchak, Yaakov, Moshe, and Yosef, and David. And in some Chaim Arans, it doesn't say, it just said that he will learn, etc. It doesn't say with whom. But in other editions, it says that he said that he's going to learn with the Shiva Royim. And there's a footnote that if you take a look in one of the letters that the Baal Shem Tov wrote, the Baal Shem Tov says there that Moshiach will learn Torah with the Shivaroyim, together with the Shivaroyim.
Are those the Spisen?
Exactly, the Ushpizin, they're known as the Ushpizin, exactly.
Pretend questions anyway now.
Just a moment. There's another footnote here that Rabbeinu Zal said that he is a bechina of Moshiach. He is an aspect of Moshiach. Not that he is Moshiach, he's a bechina of Moshiach, just that unfortunately the generation is not worthy of the Geula. And that's why he's not able to take on that role. This again is one of those statements that does not appear in all versions of Chayei Moharan. In some of them it does. The next paragraph, Reish Nun Hey, there's a chapter in Likutei Moharan, chapter 79, where Rabbeinu Zal quotes the pasuk where Moshe Rabbeinu said, "Umate Elokim biyodi," I have the stick of Hashem in my hand. This stick, this famous stick, which Moshe Rabbeinu used to perform the miracles in Mitzrayim, the Makois, and splitting the Red Sea. Rabbeinu Zal explains over there, based on the Zohar Kodesh, that this stick also represents the chief angel in Shomayim. That's mentioned several times in the Gemara, and especially in the Zohar Kodesh, other Sforim. There's an angel called Matat. We don't say the full name. The full name is Mem Tes Tes Reish Vav Nun. We're not allowed to pronounce the whole name of this Malach. And this angel is associated with Bechira. There's a lot to say. We're not going to go into the full detail about this, but just a little bit. The Zohar Kodesh tells us that in Shomayim there are different yeshivas. There's the yeshiva of Basio Bas Paroi. There's the yeshiva of Rabbi Akiva. Different yeshivas in Shomayim where Torah is being learned. The Arizal speaks about this, and the Arizal says that when he went to sleep, he was given a special pass, that he was allowed, had an open invitation to all the different yeshivas in Shomayim. So two of the yeshivas that are discussed there's a yeshiva that's called the Mesifta de Rakia, and then there's the Mesifta Ilah. The Mesifta Ilah is called the yeshiva of Hashem himself, Kavyochel, the uppermost yeshiva. The Mesifta de Rakia is called the yeshiva, the heavenly yeshiva. What is Rakia? Rakia is multicolored. The heavens, the skies are blue, the skies are sometimes reddish, different colors. This represents the concept of the Malach Memtes, which corresponds to Mishnah, the limit of Mishnah, which is kosher, posel, tomei, tohar, osur, mutar, meaning it's a combination of right and left. It's diverse, and it's brought that in the Mesifta de Rakia, there are debates, there is discussion. In the Mesifta Ilah, there's no discussion. Everything is pure, just pure statements of fact, that type of thing. So this Malach represents the concept of Bechira, the concept of choices, Chesed, Gvura, Tiferes, etc., etc. So Rabbeinu Zal, and this term Mate also represents this angel, this Malach who's called the Malach Memtes. So Moshe Rabbeinu said, "Umate Elokim biyodi," meaning that I succeeded in conquering my Bechira completely. When I say I have this in my hand, it means I achieved full control over this. That Moshe Rabbeinu achieved complete control over his Bechira, and that he can swing, he can move the stick any way he wants. Rabbeinu Zal, after he said this Torah in Likutei Moharan, he was walking back and forth, and he was holding a stick in his hand, and he said this pasuk Umate Elokim biyodi, implying also that he was zoche to conquer his Bechira completely. The next paragraph is actually a line, Reish Nun Vav, And this was turned into a song recently. Rav Nasan Zal says, I heard in the city of Lipovitz that Rabbeinu Zal said, Ani ish pele v'nishmosi hu pele godol. I am a wondrous person, and my neshama is very wondrous. Now remember, this term pele is discussed throughout the Zohar Kodesh, throughout Rabbeinu Zal Sforim, that the term pele, wondrous, refers to the keser. There's a pasuk in Yecheskel Hanavi where it says, "B'mufla mimcha al tidrosh." In that which is wondrous to you, that which is way above you, you're not allowed to delve into. And this term pele is the letters aleph and elef, 1,000, which refers to the highest levels. Rabbeinu Zal said that I am ish pele and my neshama is pele godol. And again, Rabbeinu Zal is telling us this in order for us to take him seriously, to know that when Rabbeinu Zal says to do something or not to do something, to understand how serious this is. We just, in Chutz La'aretz, yesterday we read Parshas Koirach, and Koirach said, Ki kol ha'eda kulam kedoshim. All Jews are holy. He was saying this to play down the greatness of Moshe Rabbeinu and Aaron HaKohen. Of course, Moshe Rabbeinu and Aaron HaKohen are holy Jews. So is everybody. Everybody is holy. And therefore, I can question, I can challenge any decision that Moshe Rabbeinu appointed someone. Who says he knew who maybe he did it for personal reasons. Maybe it was family, that kind of thing, a family thing. Instead of realizing that everything Moshe Rabbeinu said and did was purely Ratzon Hashem without any personal interest at all whatsoever. So here it's extremely important, and this is one of the Yesodis of Yiddishkeit, to know that all true. There's a pasuk, v'amech kulam tzadikim. And Rabbeinu Zal said every person who has a bris milah is in the category of tzaddik. But there's baby tzaddiks, and there's beginner tzaddiks, and there are intermediate tzaddiks, and there are advanced tzaddiks, and there's tzaddikim amitiyim, which is another qualifier, a true tzaddik, and then there's tzaddik ho'emes, the tzaddik ho'emes. There's levels and levels and levels, and it's extremely important for a person to know that in terms of how much effort a person makes to come close to a tzaddik and to recognize the differences among tzaddikim. We know in the story of Rab Nasan Zal's life that Rab Nasan Zal was raised in a very religious family. His father was a Talmid Chacham, very knowledgeable, the whole family very religious. At the age of 13, he married the daughter of one of the greatest Rabbanim at that time in Eastern Europe, or maybe throughout the whole Europe, Reb David Tzvi. They called him the great Reb David Tzvi. And he took Rab Nasan Zal because Rab Nasan Zal himself was so great at Talmid Chacham, and he saw tremendous potential, and he had such a wonderful family background, everything. And this Rab Nasan Zal, after he got married, was learning for a few years, so he advanced more and more. And then he met a chassid, and Rab Nasan Zal had been raised and taught that Hasidim are wrong. Their whole path in Yiddishkeit is wrong, extremely wrong, stay far away from them. And Rab Nasan Zal debated with this chassid, his chavrusa, for months, until he came to the realization that there's some truth to what his chavrusa is saying, that there are certain aspects of Yiddishkeit where the Hasidim have an advantage when it comes to Torah, when it comes to tefillah, when it comes to the mitzvahs that pertain to the heart. And then Rab Nasan Zal began a search for 6 years, going to many, the greatest of the Hasidim, the tzaddikim among the Hasidim at that time, and each time spending quality time by them and seeing their greatness, seeing how each one of these tzaddikim was very, very great. And the final one was Reb Levi Yitzchak Barditchev, who Rabbeinu Zal himself referred to as the Pe'er Hadoyer, the beauty of the generation. And yet Rab Nasan Zal felt that his search wasn't over. He continued searching. After he spent a lot of time by Reb Levi Yitzchak Barditchev, he felt that this tzaddik helped him, but not enough. He needed more. There was more. and he searched further until he found Rabbeinu Zal. And when he found Rabbeinu Zal, that's when he felt this is the last stop. And those years that he spent with Rabbeinu Zal, those 8 years, we see Rab Nasan Zal climbing and climbing. And then after Rabbeinu Zal passed away, we see Rab Nasan Zal taking everything that he got and taking it to a whole other level, a whole new level of writing his Sforim, the Likutei Tfilos, the Likutei Halachos, the other Sforim, and using what he got from his Rebbe to guarantee, to ensure that Breslov would remain alive and well hundreds of years later, hundreds of years after Rabbeinu Zal passed away. Breslov is growing by the day, by the minute, in terms of people coming close to Hashem on all levels. Any questions?
You said there's levels involved, the madrigas involved of where a person is at, and even where a tzaddik is at. Is there a way to objectively identify those levels?
The answer is it's not a matter of objectively. A person needs to learn a lot of Torah in order to be able to recognize who is a tzaddik and who isn't, number one, and to be able to understand the differences between tzaddikim. And besides learning, a person has to pray very, very hard, because we are in an olam hasheker. And the Gemara speaks about this. The Gemara speaks about tzvuim, people who present themselves as if they are real people when they're not real, when they're false, chas v'shalom. And as we get closer to the coming of Moshiach, the test becomes more and more difficult. The darkness becomes stronger, and it becomes more and more difficult to be able to see where is the tzaddik, where is and who is the tzaddik, that kind of thing.
So Rabbeinu Zal had the potential to be Mashiach. He had the bodies of being Mashiach, but the door wasn't ready.
Correct.
Also,
and this is something that's written about other tzaddikim also, that in each generation there are tzaddikim who have the potential to be able to be Moshiach, but very often it's dependent on the generation being worthy.
And also, incidentally, Reb Nasan Zal not only came from a background of religion, but Baruchnis, but also Begashmis, correct?
Correct. Reb Nasan Zal had the advantage not just of coming from such a religious family, but also a highly respected family, wealthy, where he was able to devote himself full time to learning Torah without any.
So then, why did he give up being a Kohen Imam? Why did he want to convert to Hasidus?
I wouldn't use the word convert to Hasidus, because he came to a realization that in addition, that a person learning in Kollel, who's learning Torah, Halacha, and Gemara, that there's other aspects of Yiddishkeit, such as the Tefillah, and also the limit of secrets of Torah, which without which a person's Yiddishkeit is not complete. The Chidah, who's one of the highly respected Poiskim and Mekubolim, the Chidah writes, Reb Chaim Yosef David Azuloi, he quotes a pasuk, Al tihiu kisus kifered ein hoven. Don't be like a horse, like a dumb mule, a mule that doesn't understand. And he says that this pasuk is hinting to people who choose to leave out 25% of Torah, 25% of Yiddishkeit. They focus only on pshat, remez, and drush, and they find different excuses to say, we don't learn soid, we're not allowed to, we're not supposed to, all kinds of excuses to cut away this branch of Torah, without which a person's Yiddishkeit is not complete.
But you also see, at least the real Litzfishers, right? Ones who are known and praised that they could learn for a 12-hour seder, who also have a fine and concentrating and fulfilling davening.
Question about people, we see people, non-Hasidim, who are able to learn Torah for 12 hours consistently, long periods of hours. The Torah says, the Mishnah says in Pirkei Avos, V'loi hamedrash ha'ikar ela hamaisa, that Torah alone doesn't define success in Yiddishkeit. It's what a person does with the Torah that they learn. if they're able to use it to perform mitzvahs and ma'asim tovim, and if they're able to use it to be able to daven the right way, that their tefillah should be a tefillah b'shleimus. And these are parts, this is where Rab Nasan Zal saw a difference. He recognized the difference that the true Hasidim, we're not talking about Hasidim who define Hasidus as people who daven after Zman Kriya Shema, Chas v'Shalom, or things like that. The true Hasidim, he saw that they had an advantage in this area, in these areas of the mitzvahs that are shaykh to the heart.
Right. But
There's no question in the chat. Here, Chuks.
I didn't open the chat. Just a moment, we'll open it.
If it was regarding the previous paragraph, you might have to scroll up a little bit.
Okay. A question in the chat, is this time supposed to come only when Mashiach comes? When the whole world will recognize what a privilege it was to be Rabbeinu Zal's follower? The answer is that that's when we'll see it in the fullest sense. But we see even today, those that have their eyes open have seen in the past 50 years a major change in the world. That whereas 50 years ago, if a person said they were a Breslover, or if they mentioned the word Uman, either no one ever heard of it, or if they did hear of it, it had negative connotations. And recently, times have changed dramatically, where in many cases, I would even say possibly most cases, there's a respect. Person says, wow, you are in Uman, and people look at it with a feeling of respect. They know that it's not a joke, that it's something very special. And when people hear that somebody learns Likutei Moharan or something like that, also, it's given much greater respect than it was 50 years ago. Although we're still not there. There are still places where they don't yet recognize the specialness and the goodness of Rabbeinu Zal and his teachings. The next paragraph, Reish Nun Zayin, Rabbeinu Zal said that I possess a level of recognition of Hashem that if I would want, I would be able to bring about the coming of Moshiach by connecting to that incredible high level of recognition of Hashem. However, I've put it aside and I applied myself to being Mekarev you, to bringing you, my students, close to Hashem. Because that's more important than everything. As the Zohar HaKodesh says, the famous quote from the Zohar HaKodesh in Parshas Truma, Zako manda'ochid biyoda d'chayova. Ashrei to the person who takes hold of the hand of a Rasha and brings him close. I remember hearing from my Rebbe Rav Rosenfeld Zichron Livracha that in the Haggadah on Pesach, it speaks there about Keneged Arbo Bonim Dibra Torah. It says that there are 4 sons that the Torah speaks about. One is a Chacham, then is a Rasha, then is a Tam, and then is She'en Yedei Elishol. There's the Chacham, the Rasha, the Tam is the simple one, and She'en Yedei Elishol is one who doesn't yet know what to ask, like a Baal Tshuva. And the Arizal asks a question, and others ask this question. It seems out of order. It would seem that the right order should be the Chacham on top, and the Rasha should be on bottom, all the way at the end. Why did he put the Rasha next to the Chacham? And the answer was that a Chacham who doesn't have a Rasha next to him isn't a real Chacham. That the real definition of Chacham is one who is qualified and able to take the Rasha and bring him close. Moshe Rabbeinu, who was the ultimate Chacham, one aspect of his Chacham is he was able to take the greatest idol worshiper in the world. He was able to take Yisroi and bring him close to Hashem, tachas kanfei hashchina. He was able to take the Jews when they were at minus 49, the lowest level of Tumah in Mitzrayim, and be able to elevate them, lift them up, and bring them to Har Sinai. And that's when Rab Nosson Zal says, Rabbeinu Zal reprimanded us in a strong way, and he said, how much effort, how much work did I put into you? How many times was my throat completely parched and dry from all the speeches, everything I said to you, each and every one of you individually? And now, what did I accomplish? What did I accomplish? Even though, Baruch Hashem, you're religious, but not the way I wanted. Rabbeinu Zal once made a comment to his Talmidim that I wanted you to be like lions roaring in the jungles. I wanted your tefillah to be like that, like a lion, the roar of a lion. And he wanted us to become tzaddikim gemurim. He wanted to make tzaddikim gemurim out of us. And Rabbeinu Zal said, how in the world am I going to come before the kisei hakavod when I leave this world? And then he added, but I console myself with the few people that I was zeicha to bring close to Hashem who are no longer in this world, who have passed away already. Those people, I know, I'm sure of them. I'm sure that they made it. Whereas those that are still living in this world are always in danger every minute of chas v'shalom falling away. And Rav Nosson Zal said, I heard this also from Rabbeinu Zal himself, that those who passed away already, them he knows for sure, they're his people. The Talmidim of Rabbeinu Zal who had already passed away at that time, who are no longer living. It doesn't mention by name. There were those that because those that are alive, adayin heim besakona gedola, are still in major danger every moment of their life, chas v'shalom, from falling. Whereas those that passed away, those I can be sure of. We know that the Degel Machne Ephraim, who was a nephew of the Baal Shem Tov, one of the famous things that he told us is that he was once sitting on his uncle's lap, on the Baal Shem Tov's lap, and the Baal Shem Tov was in a room with all of his Talmidim. And the Baal Shem Tov said, there's a person in this room who says Torah, Loi mi pi malach, v'loi mi pi sorov, ela mi pi HaKadosh Baruch Hu bi'atzmoi. He says Torah, that not that he received from an angel but Torah that he heard directly from Hashem himself. And that person is in danger every second of his life of falling into the nukva de tohaim rabba, of falling into the lowest places. This the Baal Shem Tov was saying about himself. Could you imagine how that applies to us? That each and every one of us needs to know. Rav Nosson Zal writes in Likutei Halachos that we make in Ma'ariv, we say Kikel Shoimreinu Umatzilenu. We mention and we make a Shomer Amo Yisrael. The person needs to know that in this world we need shmira, we need protection all the time. Beruchnius and Begashmius. Begashmius, the Gemara says, Kol Hadrochim Becheskas Sakona. All roads are dangerous. We know a person goes out on a trip, they say Tfilas Haderech. And we know, unfortunately, nowadays, with cars and trains and planes and electric bikes and motorcycles and those things, unfortunately, we hear every day of accidents and all kinds of results from these accidents. That's Begashmius. Alachas Kama V'Kama Beruchnius. The danger, the Gemara says in Brachas, that we don't see. A person is walking the street who doesn't see that there's on his right and on his left, there's all kinds of malachim, and many of them are destructive angels that want to try to cause a person to trip and fall every which way possible. Why are we being told this? To know that there's what to be mispalel for. To know that we are in a sakana every moment of our lives. We're in a sakana, and a person needs to beg Hashem for shmira, for protection. And a person needs to run to the miklat, to the protective area, which is the Beis Medrash, the place where a person's, the Tevas Noach, as it's called, Noah's Ark, that Rabbeinu Zal said, especially, we spoke about the future, that there's going to be a mabul, there's going to be a flood of apikursis in the world. What do you do when there's a mabul? You have to find the ark, Noah's ark, the Teva, and be able to go inside there and be protected there. The word Teva means ark, and the word Teva means word. The words of Torah, the words of Tefillah, that's the Shmirah, that's the protection. We know we say in Tikkun HaKloli, in the second chapter of Tikkun HaKloli, we say there, Al zois yispal kol chosed eilecho le'es mitzoi, rak l'shetef mayim rabim elov lo yagiu. That this is what every chosed davens to Hashem le'es mitzoi. When he finds the tzaddik, when he finds a connection to Hashem, what does he daven for? Rak l'shetef mayim rabim elov lo yagiu. That tsunami, that flood shouldn't hit me. Hashem protect me, because I know that there are waves. I know that I'm in the sea and there are waves. And there are waves that can knock me over in a second. The Gemara says there were Tanoim, Amoiroim, who thought, they felt a level of confidence at one point in time, and they said, Gira beina de sitna, I spit in an arrow in the eye of the Satan. And the Gemara says, a minute later, the Satan set up a scenario where they almost fell, and he said, don't play with me, don't tease me. You should know the only reason why I'm not throwing you off a cliff is because Hashem said you're a good guy, that I shouldn't destroy you. But if I wanted to, I could. If this is what tzaddikim are saying, Alachas kama v'kama, we need to know not to be overconfident, that we need shmira all the time, and the shmira is Torah and Tefillah and mitzvahs and ma'asim tovim. Any questions?
Yeah.
A question. Didn't we just learn in a paragraph before that Rabbeinu Zal said that the generation was unworthy for him to bring Mashiach, implying that he couldn't do it, and now here he's saying that he could do it through Hasagos. The answer is it's not a contradiction at all. There's multiple things going on at the same time. And here again, Rabbeinu Zal was telling us that there are different ways to bring about the Geula. There are different ways to hit a home run. One way is through Hasagos. When a tzaddik, one of the very well-known commentaries on the Zohar Kodesh, the Kisei Melech, writes that a person who learns secrets of Torah for 30 minutes, it's like a month of learning Gemara, Rashi, Tosfos. So there's different levels of concentrate. When a person needs to get rid of stains sometimes, a person on ordinary stain, you use a certain powerful cleaning powder. A much stronger stain, you need bleach, you need a much more powerful stain remover. Lahavdil, there are different levels in Torah and Avodas Hashem. Rabbeinu Zal wanted us to know that there's a level of Hasagas Elokus, there's a level of depth in Torah, which if a tzaddik focuses on that can create 1,000,000 volts or 1,000,000,000 volts that could bring about the coming of Moshiach. And Rabbeinu Zal said, I have that choice, I have the ability to do that, but I know that there's something that Hashem wants more than that. There's something better than that, which is bringing people close to Hashem. People that are involved in fundraising know that sometimes a person comes to a very wealthy person and the person needs a large amount. The person needs a building or something like that requires $1 million. And this wealthy person can write a check for $1 million and it won't change his lifestyle. But the person says, I don't want to do that. I'll give you $250,000 because I don't want to take the whole thing I want other people to be included. The tzaddikim know that if they wanted to, they could force the coming of Moshiach through their goodness alone, but they know that that's not what Hashem wants. Hashem wants that everybody should be included. Hashem wants everybody to have a chelik in it, everybody who's willing to cooperate, everyone who's willing to join. And therefore the tzaddik chooses not to go that route, even though he's learning, he's reaching very great hasagos, but he'll let go of that to a degree in order to devote time and effort and energy to bringing people close to Hashem, which he knows is the greatest nachas to Hashem. Rabbeinu Zal writes about this in several places in the Likutei Moharan, that's the greatest kiddush Hashem and kvod shamayim is when somebody who's far from Hashem comes close to Hashem. paragraph Reish Nun Hey, Rabbeinu Zal once said, I thought it was my Yetzer Hara telling me that there's nobody who's qualified to teach and bring the youth close to Hashem to lead them like myself. I thought it was my Yetzer Hara telling me that. But now I realize, and it's become very clear to me, that I am a unique leader of the generation. As ich bin ein manik, ve'en manik kamoni. That there's no one who's qualified, who has the same ability as me in leading the Bnei Neurim, in leading the youth. Interesting, the way that this is being presented, that Rabbeinu Zal saw it, I thought it was coming from my Yetzer Hara, and then I realized it wasn't. I had something like this with my Rebbe, Reb Michal Dorfman, Zechron Avracha. He had major hardships during his life. He went through a lot of tremendous difficulties. Number one, most of his friends left the Soviet Union in the 1930s, 1920s and 30s, and earlier they were able to get out. And he wasn't. He remained in Soviet Russia under communist rule till 1967. Another 30 years, 40 years after just about all of his friends had left. And he spent 6 years and 7 months in Siberia. and suffered extreme poverty during the time he was living in the Soviet Union. And finally got out. And first they only let him and his wife out. They didn't let his children out. And he still left. And gradually, eventually, his 3 daughters ended up getting out of the Soviet Union. And 2 of them were doctors. 2 of his daughters were doctors. The 3rd one worked in the Ministry of Health. They were all educated, quality people. And a short while after he came to Eretz Yisrael, his oldest daughter became ill and she passed away. Lo Yaleinu, we should never ever know the pain of a parent who loses a child, a parent who has to bury a child, Rahman al-Islam. And then a second daughter, many years later, a second daughter got cancer and ended up passing away during his lifetime. And then his wife passed away. A lot of struggle. And in some ways, all of that didn't compare to the pain that he felt sometimes in seeing things going on that troubled him, that he felt that certain things going on in the religious world that needed major improvement or correction. And at one point, after all of this had happened, we were riding in the car, and he said to me that something occurred to me recently, and I'm not sure if it's coming from my Yetzer Hara or my Yetzer Toiv. What is it? He said, I started thinking of maybe taking a little bit of vodka in the morning with my breakfast as a perk, as something, as a pick-me-up. I know I used to shop there many times, and he used to like people that come from Russia. They like a piece of herring, a piece of spice. He would buy a thing of herring and take a small piece together with vegetables in the morning with his breakfast as a perk. And he said this with all seriousness, that he wasn't sure where this is coming from. And I listened. A day or 2 later, he said he's been thinking about this, and he decided he's gonna ask a doctor. He wants to hear what a doctor has to say about this. For a person of his age, at this point he was maybe in his 80s for sure, his age and all of his physical conditions. A day or 2 after that, he told me that he spoke to a doctor, and the doctor told him, not only isn't this a problem, but this would be very good based on his health, based on his blood circle, everything, this would be a very good thing. And he told me he did research, and he found out among the vodkas, there's something called Absolute, which is a pure type of vodka. He said, here's money, I want you to buy me a bottle of Absolute. And he said, a bottle like this will last me 6 months or 4 months. There's no chance that I'm going to take a second cup or something like that. I'll use a little cup and I'll have it. But to see how a person of this caliber, a thought came into his mind of doing a certain thing, and his intentions were obviously pure. This wasn't taivas achila. He wasn't looking to get high. This was something to bring a little perk. And yet he wasn't sure, is it coming from a good place or a bad place? And he thought about it. He was mispalel, obviously, and then thought, I want to hear what a doctor has to say also. His opinion also has a certain place in making this decision. And then went ahead and did it. And for the next few years, every 6 months or so, he would say, running low, get me another bottle. And again, to see only a drop was used, that what he needed, not more. We know Rabbeinu Zal speaks about mili d'shtusa, and that a person, here again, Rabbeinu Zal himself, he said for him, the rotzoi wasn't an avoida, the shoiv was an avoida. We need to know who we are. And there are many people, I just had a case recently like this, of a young man who from the age of 13 years old was involved in drugs, all kinds of drugs, and all kinds of difficult, terrible things. From 13 to 18, 5 years of incredible struggles and everything. And I met this person about 9 months ago, and his father was about to put him into a rehab place with men, women, non-Jews, all kinds of people. And the father asked me if I would speak to him. And I said, yeah, sure. And we had like a 45-minute discussion. And then I said to him afterwards, I want you to call me every day. I want you to call me every single day to talk. He said, I call you tomorrow? I said, yes. This was 11 o'clock. Call him yeah, tomorrow. Start tomorrow. For 7 months or so, this person called every single day. And the person, I'd say, percentage-wise, 97% ups, 3% downs. 97% of the time got up in the morning to go to shul, went to mikveh before davening, started davening vasikin some days, all kinds of tremendous, a lot of good. Once in 3-4 weeks, there was a little bit of a fall and right away jumped back on. And this person used to like to exercise. There were certain things he did for recreation. And I spoke to the person several times throughout this, and he was learning. He had a chavrusa and another chavrusa and learning. And I spoke to him a few times about looking for a parnasa, looking for something to do as a livelihood, because the Mishnah says, Toiv toirem derech eretz shegiya shnei mishkach hasovayim, that 1 in 1,000 people maybe is qualified to be learning full time and to devote himself totally to avodas Hashem. The other 999, if they try to do that, and it's above their level, they're not going to be able to maintain it, and a personal fall, chas v'shalom. And unfortunately, this is what happened. After 7 months of every single day, at one point, a certain test came up, didn't pass the test, and went south in a major way. And understanding that we see that even by Rabbeinu Zal, when he saw a certain thing, he questioned, is this coming from my Yetzer Tov or my Yetzer Hara? We know that in our tefillah we say, V'haser soton milfonenu me'acharenu. We ask Hashem, please remove the satan that's in front of me and in back of me. What do you mean front and back? There's a satan that's in front of me that when I want to come close to Hashem, there's pushback. He's pushing me back and saying, no, I don't want you to daven in the first minyan. I want you to daven in the second minyan. I don't want you to learn 3 hours. Learn 1 hour. It's enough. There's that satan. And then there's another satan who's standing behind the person saying, you want to come close to Hashem? I'll help you. Run. Don't walk, run. Because he knows that this person at that point isn't qualified to be running like that. And if he runs, he's going to fall. And if he falls, he might not be able to pick himself up. So we need to know, especially for people on our level, to know that Rabbeinu Zal spoke. The Gemara says, Pa'amim bitul shel Torah zui kiyuma. Person needs to know that we need sleep, we need food, we need recreation sometimes, each person. And the right combination is a winning combination. And chas v'shalom, any miscalculation, we had this in Parshas Korach. Korach came to Moshe Rabbeinu. The Torah says Korach was a pikeach. He was a Levi, he was a Kodesh, he was on a very high madrega, the Zohar Kodesh says. And he came to Moshe Rabbeinu with a talis that was all tcheles. There are people today that wear tcheles in their tzitzis, one little string. Korach came with, and he dressed the 250 rabbonim that were with him in Talesim of Tchelis. He was a rich guy. He was able to afford it. And he said to Moshe Rabbeinu, does this require tzitzis? And Moshe Rabbeinu said, yes, definitely. And he started laughing. What kind of ridiculous, illogical thing is that? If a person has a beged, a regular beged of wool or something, one string of tchelis is enough to kosher it. If the entire beged is tchelis, of course. And then another question, a room full of svarim, does it require a mezuzah? And Moshe Rabbeinu said, definitely yes. And again, laughing. Look how he doesn't know what he's talking about. Imagine, the mezuzah is to remind you about Hashem. That little mezuzah that has Shema Yisrael in it is a reminder. If I have a room that's wall-to-wall svarim, I need a reminder? And Moshe Rabbeinu said yes. And these are all examples of his not realizing that it's only the true tzaddikim that know what's too little, what's too much, and what's just right. And if you change, if you go off the path in either direction, it results in catastrophe. We should be to come close to the true tzaddikim and to appreciate the fact that we have Rabbeinu Zal teaching us and guiding us, to serve Hashem the right way and to be to see the Gula Shleima B'mher Yameinu, Amen v'Amen. Any questions before we close?
Moharan, Nasan, just
Yes.
a quick question. I would like to know, of all the farms that Rabbeinu wrote, what's a good sefer to get people excited and interested? Like Sipur Maises, my intention is to give a shiur in a Litvak shul where people are not exactly, booking a ticket to Uman. And I'd like to maybe the Rav could come, I don't know. Just quickly, what's a good sefer?
The answer is it depends on the person and it depends on the crowd. It's very, very important to recognize that. One of the great rabbis that I had the privilege of coming close to, Reb Nachman Burstein, Zechron Levracha, and many other Breslov Rabbonim, very often when they had to speak to a group of people that are non-Breslov, they wouldn't have a Breslov sefer in front of them. They would start with a Gemara, a Medrash, something else, something that everybody could relate to and not feel that they're being introduced to something that they have they never had anything to do with it, that kind of thing. In order for people to be able to relate, to be able to connect, and use that to lead into things from Rabbeinu Zal, that kind of thing. There are people who want to hear about tefillah. There are people who have an atiyah. They'd love to be able to daven better or to learn about tefillah. For them, Hishtapchus HaNefesh is a great sefer. There are people today, especially today, who are suffering from lack of happiness, lack of simcha. And for them, there are the chapters in Likutei Moharan that speak about simcha. You need to know generally each person or the crowd that you're dealing with what to use. There are certain svarim that are more of a general type. There's the book Crossing the Narrow Bridge, for example, that came out recently, the English version, the Hebrew version, which is an excellent selection of maybe 20 different topics to hear Rabbeinu Zal's insights on these topics. For some people, that's a very good way to introduce them to these teachings. Before these later Sforim came out, I remember 50 years ago, my Rebbe Rav Rosenfeld, when somebody expressed an interest in Breslov, usually he would tell them to start from Sichei Saran, Rabbi Nachman's wisdom, which is much easier than Likutei Moharan, and it's a way of a person getting their feet wet, in a sense. But even there, it's very, very good to know who you're dealing with and to try to pinpoint what that person could relate to easiest, to give them a healthy start. Wishing everybody a wonderful week. Today is one of the days, I believe, of the Yortzeit, of the massacre that took place in Uman, the 30,000 tzaddikim who refused to bow to a cross and died al Kiddush Hashem. And that was one of the main reasons that we know of why Rabbeinu Zal chose to be buried specifically in that place among these 30,000 Kiddushim. Schusam Yogan Aleinu v'al Kol Yisrael. Their merit should be a schus for us and for all of Klal Yisrael. Baruch Hashem.
Thank you, Rabbi Nasan.
Sure. All the best.
What's the ending of the Mach?
Memtes. That this Malach I'm sorry?
Off?
We're off?
It's the one?
Yes, it's not recording anymore. Yeah. This mal, it's brought that Kaviochel during the 6 days of the week, Hashem allows this malach sort of to run the world under Hashem's control, because the 6 days of the week, Sunday is Chesed, Monday is Gevura, Tuesday is Chesed. This malach is a combination of right and left, and therefore he represents this concept of Bechira.
What's the problem with invoking his name?
Very good question. This is one of the first things I heard from Rav Rosenfeld. The Arizal says that when you mention the name of a malach, you're calling that malach, and the malach comes. And if you're not qualified, if you don't have any good reason why you're inviting that malach, or if you're not on a madrega to do it, person can be harmed in the process. The only names you're allowed to, those names which were given, Michael, Gavriel, Raphael, those names which have become names of Yidden, that you're allowed to say. But all the malachim whose names are not popular names of Yidden, you're not allowed to say the name of the malach.
Is it true that there are names of malachim that can be said by daytime and not by night?
I didn't hear of that. I never heard of that. I don't know. But I heard from Rav Rosenfeld, and I saw it in the Arizal, that Reb Chaim Vital writes that my Rebbe told me, not to mention the names of malachim except these malachim whose names are given to Jewish kids.
There are many names in Machzorim, for Yom Leilon.
Yeah, it's in most of the Machzorim. It says, don't say it.
Don't read it.
Just look at it. Don't say it.
Like during Duchman.
Exactly.
So that's what they are. They're the names of
Malachim. Exactly.
You're only supposed to not actually say them.
Exactly. It's a pleasure having you. Sometimes I give a shiur, nobody asks questions, and I wonder, who am I talking to? There's nobody there.
I have to film for Shmuel Rosenberg.